All right, then I start on the bottom of my list, actually, instead of the top where I had the two Andrews. Let me start by introducing Chris. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Byrnes. They say it like that.
That's right. Yeah, Byrnes, exactly right.
Yes. Okay, great. So yeah, let me pull up my notes to make this go as easy as possible. Yeah, here we have it. So Chris is the co-founder of PsyDAO, and he is a legal advisor, IP legal advisor to Molecule. He studied philosophy and theology, which I find is not philosophy, law and theology, which I find is a very interesting combination. He worked then as an IP lawyer, and before he went into Molecule, where he's now inventing new forms of IP, creating IP NFTs and IP tokens. And today he's going to be talking about that, and at the same time representing PsyDAO. So really happy to have you here, Chris.
Thanks so much. Definitely a flattering description of what we're trying to build with the legal primitives, but I think it's really exciting and super excited to chat as broadly about what I'm seeing in the ecosystem, and then specifically on PsyDAO, which continues to be this very particular sort of work in progress. But I'm happy to talk about anything PsyDAO specific as well.
Great. Then next on my list, I have Albert Anis. He's the co-founder of ValleyDAO, synthetic biology DAO, which is focused on using synthetic biology to solve problems in health and climate and what else it can be applied to. He got an MA in biotechnology, so he has a background in synthetic biology. And he used to work at a competition called iGEM, where he helped student projects turn into startups. And he was doing a lot of this consulting, and now he's applying his expertise in ValleyDAO, where he helps researchers turn their intellectual property into products. Yeah, very happy to have you here too, Albert.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, like we focus, we don't actually focus at all on human health. We focus primarily on solving climate issues and food security. So in this way, we're slightly different from the other BioDAOs who focus exclusively on human health.
Okay, thank you. I mixed up the usage of synthetic biology.
But it definitely, yeah, it has a big application in health as well, for sure.
Great. And then next on my list, I have Laura. Laura is the founder and core lead of AthenaDAO, a DAO focused on the criminally underfunded area of women's health. And she has a background in linguistics and worked as a brand specialist, where she had already launched fashion-focused tech accessories and grew that to a large following and revenue-making successful product. Then she was a longevity advocate, active in BetaDAO and the field, and now she has started her own BioDAO focused on women's health. Laura, very happy to have you here. Do you also want to say a few words?
Thank you. I'm always very glad to represent women in these panels. I hope that in the future we have more.
If you continue doing your work, I'm sure we will. Great. So we still don't have the other Andrew around, but that won't stop me from introducing you, Andrew. So we have here Andrew Verbinnen from HairDAO, a DAO focused on research into hair loss and treatments in hair loss in an open source and democratic way. Andrew graduated Hamilton College and then worked as an investor in real estate at first. And he described that as being too uninteresting to keep him in the field. And he moved into equity and crypto investing, which was more interesting. And that kind of exposed him to the BioDAO space back then with BetaDAO. And now he is the co-founder of an own DAO focused on hair loss.
No, I appreciate that. I'd forgotten that I'd written the part about real estate being a bit boring, but yeah, no, I was investing in crypto for a while, and I think ultimately found myself, I was also sort of simultaneous. I'm 27 now. I was losing my hair when I was about 20 years old. So did a lot of personal research there on my own. And I think sort of as a crypto investor, saw the way people were building in the space. Really, I just wasn't a fan of, I thought they were sort of missing the point a lot with how you can build in crypto in a very capital efficient way that leverages like a global community, global workforce around a certain problem. And so, yeah, I figured, sort of saw VitaDAO, saw and the problems and the incentives they were sort of fixing at the NIH, and realized that a lot of those same problems could be fixed with crypto in hair loss. And so, yeah, it's looking good so far.
Very, very nice. I'm very glad to have you all here. And since we kind of focus on bringing together the traditional science space and the decentralized science space, and sort of also translating to the audience of the traditional scientist, what is a BioDAO? I would like you guys to go into that. And maybe since you all come from different fields, we can do something that is like, when you take an image of, in ethnicity research, they do this, like you overlay a bunch of images so you have the average person of a certain ethnicity. So maybe we could do that with the BioDAOs. If we overlap all of them, then what would be the things that they have in common, like the average BioDAO? So can we maybe go into that, and anyone feels able to like average across the space and paint a picture of what is a BioDAO?
I mean, yeah, I can start out. I mean, I saw the movie Oppenheimer recently, and I thought it was pretty amazing. Like when you get all these scientists collaborating on a joint mission, sort of like the real innovation that's possible. I think it's, very few people have all of the answers to big problems in one head. And so ultimately, like the collaboration is just so key to incentivizing that. I think traditional science has just become so siloed by sort of all these researchers working in parallel, not really talking as much to each other for IP reasons, or just for like competition over the same grants. So it's become very competitive amongst researchers versus sort of problem focused, or like, around the issues, at least in our case, that plague patients. And I think BioDAOs offer a really awesome way for researchers to coordinate, be on the same team, and all sort of accrue value if they're successful in solving whatever their problem is.
All right. So collaboration, I hear. Anyone else has some
I
input?
think the most obvious thing right now for all the BioDAOs, and I can say for the ones that are here, it's the IP NFTs. And that would take us back to obviously what the team Chris is part of. We are all doing we're all aligned in different missions, but the one thing that puts us on the same category is the utilization of the blockchain technology, the incentives, and obviously right now it's the intellectual property NFTs that, at least for now, we are all utilizing. Everybody's doing their own streams of something else, but I would say that they're also very new, right? So this is BioDAOs today. And today, the one thing that really unites them all is the fact that they came out of this concept of intellectual property NFT that obviously VitaDAO started with, that have done successful for 2.5 years. So this is now. I don't know, crypto goes so fast that maybe in 5 years, this is going to be legacy. But I would say that would be like the very obvious thing to say right now about BioDAOs.
Yeah, those were also the two things that I was expecting to get from this question, like the collaboration aspect of the community coming together behind an issue, a research topic, a research program, and the other one would be the IP NFTs. Is there anything else that one of you guys would like to add to this?
I think like back when I was working as a kind of like a biobusiness consultant, helping academics commercialize their research. I was also part of hosting an incubator program, a life science incubator program. And so I got to see a lot of different case studies of successful synbio companies. And the ones that were the most successful were also the ones with the densest network. So, you know, the network with the right people that could continuously push them to the next stage of their success. And essentially a DAO is like an aggregator of people. Everything, you know, to me at least, everything is about people who, you know, a DAO acts as a magnet for all of these things, creates incentives for people to collaborate and also spend their time to progress different assets. So, you know, in this case, all of the BioDAOs are working on progressing these IP NFTs. And why IP NFTs are very interesting is like it enables the bridging of intellectual property of data, of technology on chain, where they can be governed by a decentralized community. I think that's really fascinating because we haven't really seen that before in any configuration of like collaboration. So there's, yeah, a lot of potential for these DAOs to act as these aggregators of talents and push forward different types of assets.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, you're right on time, because now that we have seen that the core elements are really the community and the IP NFT. The question is, of course, we understand what a community is. Albert also went nicely into it, like a dense network of people that can push each other forward. Then the question is, what is an IP NFT? And that might be something that we can break down here. Could you maybe explain what that is?
I'm excited to explain it, and I think I can connect it also to this overlay. I like how you described it of what is a BioDAO, and to kind of start from there. I think I have a really positive impression of all of the BioDAOs and everyone involved, everyone on this call, because we're actually all people who are, we know there's something wrong with how the intellectual property economy functions with respect to these missions that we want to achieve. And we're all out there trying, right? We're all just trying to do something better in pursuit of a patient-driven mission. And that's just awesome. That's really cool. IP NFTs work really well as an organizing tool in some way for all of us, because they're just legal primitives. We've been sort of launching them, or VitaDAO's first use case for them was simply to assign the legal rights that are included in a sponsored research agreement, which is just any old normal sponsored research agreement one might have, and simply as a PDF, put those into a token on chain, and that's an IP NFT, right? At its essence, really, and why I get excited about just what we're building generally as an ecosystem, and I think it has revolutionary potential, is that it's really any very well crafted and defined intellectual property right more generally. It can be a licensing right, it could be an assignment of property altogether, but it's essentially a new way for us to tokenize and sort of slice and dice and carve up intellectual property rights and the definitions of what we would constitute to be intellectual property, which is, when we put that on blockchain, it's kind of incredible, because in the legacy IP economy, it's massively inefficient. It's very expensive just to participate in it. IP quality in, patent quality reviews show 50% of patents litigated on the merits are invalid. These are things, it's such a inefficient system in need of a system upgrade that Web3 actually provides. And IP NFTs are sort of the tokenized version of intellectual property that capture this cultural moment, and then we'll see where they go. So I'm sure they're going to evolve in protocol and how we're all using them, but just the mere advent of tokenized intellectual property is itself just sort of fundamentally revolutionary to the intellectual property economy more generally. And so that, I think, is sort of this cool thing that the IP NFT is simply creating liquidity with IP rights and sort of maintaining IP ownership. and then having motivated people who want to take that technology and apply it to new markets where it can only do good and sort of help further fund these DAO, public oriented missions. So I guess that's my best take on it. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I like also how it gets me excited how you see this as a revolutionary thing, and I guess you really carry that across for a person who already understands the basics of the blockchain. And I think what we have seen now is that IP NFT is pretty much like taking intellectual property and putting that on the blockchain. And it would be interesting to hear from some of you other guys who are not lawyers. Why is that exciting to you? Why did that make you start your own DAO behind that idea?
Can I take it here, specific to women's health? I think what's very interesting, and I say this, I spend half of my career selling things to people they don't need in the luxury and fashion industry. And when it comes to women's health, and why I say, you said it, criminally underfunded. More than criminally underfunded, I think it's a massively overlooked opportunity. Women make the luxury industry, they make the beauty industry, they even make the healthcare industry. But when it comes to science, we've failed them across the board, from biopharma to government agencies. And I think there's something very powerful about the fact that with this new way of utilizing blockchain, because women are used to dealing with unregulated industries. They take supplements, they do Botox in their face, they know how all that stuff works. It's very powerful when they realize now they can put $50 towards an ATH token, towards foolproof science that is in an intellectually property contract, which they know science and researchers have worked through in very reputable academic institutions, and that they're actually powering this research. So once women realize, because not a lot of them know, that women's health is massively underfunded, and within their own spending power, they have the capability of powering science that is coming out of the most prestigious institutes, the best researchers, and then with that capital, we ourselves can take it from end to end. Obviously, I'm very excited about that, because nothing like that exists for specifically women's health. There is obviously a lot of beauty companies, there is a lot of supplement companies, and women, when they're motivated, they have their Facebook groups, there's all these communities, but none of them have come around science. And with blockchain, we're making that connect, because DAOs deal with different stakeholders, right? The researchers, the funders, the technology, and the communities. And that circle, it's quite powerful, and it doesn't exist in any other mechanism. A foundation has their board of, their board, and that's who manages everything. Our community doesn't have access to the science, and the funders, they're dealing more directly, like what I would call B2B, maybe like really big funders. So we're closing, instead of being in a vicious cycle, we start like a virtuous cycle of connecting the dots and making capital that women do have work for them when it comes to science. And I say this for women's health. I cannot say that that's the same for every other BioDAO, but this is how blockchain is very, the IP NFTs and blockchain is very powerful.
So this is something that when I try to summarize what you said, I hear that it's enables women to get behind funding their own research into their own underfunded domain by using their own money to get the scientists to produce intellectual property that will actually help serve them. So one reason to be excited for IP NFTs for you is to take science into the hands of the end user in a way. So fund the research that you want to see. Andrew, you open your mic. Do you want to say something?
Yeah. I would also just say, I mean, what's so cool about IP NFTs is you're taking an asset class, which is typically who owns what IP. It's very opaque. It's you have to call around these TTOs, it's just hard to get around. And then even when you do want to say license some IP or something like that, there's all these due diligence costs and title sort of costs that go into making sure they actually own what they say they own. And so I think there's just the IP NFT at scale, when you have a full-blown marketplace where you could just cruise, you're buying something on Amazon and you're oh, I'm going to buy the IP rights for this cancer molecule, but for the indication of hair loss or something like that, that time and friction savings that just is enabled pretty much by putting things transparently, putting ownership transparently on the blockchain, is such an efficiency improvement on an order of magnitude that I think just allows for new types of entrepreneurship, particularly in biotech and the rest of science.
Nice. Another thing that Laura also hinted at was that in a way that you like that also connects to what you just said, Andrew. It's like the transparency on the one hand in the ownership and in what you're owning, and the other thing is in the research itself. So that is the same as like what you're owning in this case. But that's what you were saying, is like women can maybe pay $50 and actually get solid evidence for what they're doing. Can maybe some of you guys explain how does a BioDAO make research more transparent and accessible to somebody like a person who suffers from hair loss but is maybe not a scientist, or a woman who suffers from underfunding any kind of medical condition?
I don't know if anybody wants to take this. I can say from my side, I think we're dealing all with very different communities, because I would think the SynBio community is they understand, they would be more into very modern, very not progressive, but I would say almost like sci-fi science, right? They're like the futurist. So they might have a better understanding of science. And I would say, I don't know about the guys who are losing their hair. They probably are like the longevity guys, which are very methodical about learning the science, because they're obsessed about not learning the science. Anybody who's obsessed about not losing something, they really get into it. With women's health, I think we're obviously dealing with different areas of women's health. And I think the one thing that has the most potential is menopause, because not all women are looking forward to going through menopause, and that is like aging. It's very contentious. It takes the same amount of people that are for it, calling it a natural aspect of life, and others that say, no, it's not. So longevity people don't think that aging is something that we just have to let pass. And the same would be for menopause, but there's very different ways to deal with your communities. There's your researcher community, there's obviously also your regular community, and making that connect. It just depends on where you wanna focus on. For us, we obviously want to provide also the service of translating the science, because right now women's health is a lot of it, the access and knowledge women are getting from Instagram, on TikTok, from influencers. And that is great, because some of them are great and they're actually MDs and researchers themselves, but a lot of them are not. So how do we become a hub of centralized information for women that gives them the information they need? They don't need to know about senescent cells, because that's not what they care about. Most people care about what they can do for their health and what they can buy. And really translating the impact of intellectual property. I wouldn't say water it down, but take it down a notch to whatever that woman really wants to know. It's actually quite, I think it's quite a big task for us personally that we have, or the community. Because we assume a lot of things, and we learned a lot that a lot of people don't even know what a wallet is when it comes to crypto. Never mind when you get into IP NFTs, or when you get into science, senescent cells, they don't know what that is, and they don't need to know. What they need to know is that maybe they have PCOS or endometriosis, or that they had issues with their egg freezing, and that the science that we're funding could change this. So you have to really know who you're talking to, because you're talking to different people at different times, and we're dealing with very different communities constantly. That's personally what I feel it's the thing for AthenaDAO, that we really have to be thinking of who our audience is all the time. And that I can say from our side, I don't think it's everybody's experience either.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, you go, Albert. My bad.
I just want to add, like, I was surprised when we initiated ValleyDAO, the sheer amount of non-synthetic biology biotech researchers that joined the cause. Like, for many people, it was the first time they ever heard about synthetic biology. And many of these people were actually quite frustrated about, that there wasn't any other viable means of like technologies that can be directly applied to solve climate challenges. So I think, what has been to our benefit is like we've managed to translate some of that frustration into action by these individuals. So now there are people who are learning about the field, who are helping each other out in the DAO to learn about new research articles, sharing these kinds of things. So I think there's so much potential in onboarding non-researchers, non-academics, non-technical people into this thing, to ultimately create and bring science much closer to everyday people. I think we talk about silos, researchers operating in silos. I think the reason is because they don't have anyone else to relate to. So I think by bridging these different stakeholders, like everyday people, scientists, engineers, I think DAOs can do that really, really well.
So yeah, what I'm hearing is sort of like a closing of the loop between the, like through this crowdfunding idea where patient communities can take on, or like in ValleyDAO, you don't deal with patients, but where stakeholders can fund research into their own domains. They also become more closely connected to the scientists, and the scientists also become more closely connected to them because the loop seems to be closed. So they are kind of also forced to explain to their source of funding what they're doing in order to continue doing that.
There's a whole new level of like appreciation of scientists. Like, so the researchers that we've been working with, the reason why they really like working with us and receiving funding from us is like, it comes with so much more. There's actually a whole group of people who act as a sounding board, before their science is ultimately funded. They receive feedback on like how the research trajectory can be approved, or things that they've haven't really considered before from, let's say, a market translation point of view. And I think that they're very frustrated about that no other funding agency gives some sort of additional spark to their research beyond that funding.
Nice.
Yeah, I would also just add that, like, in terms of how do you open source science, I mean, you open source it by pretty much doing it in front of everybody for them to view and watch the process. I mean, I think when you're like, we're internally generating studies that we then go out and fund in the real world, but like from within our Discord server. And so there's always going to be a spectrum of like, does a person just want to try the product, or do they want to like learn about the process and actually contribute? And when everything's available, that then your optionality is complete, versus sort of cherry picking what people get to see, what people don't get to see. You kind of make it all available. And then if people want to train themselves, it's very much possible because they have access to that information. And I think what's kind of cool, like when you're truly innovating, right, there's no right answer necessarily. It's more like arguments that slowly get closer to the truth. And so very rarely when you're really on the edge of innovation, is it going to be like, this is the right answer. The true answer is like, we don't know. And these two people have conflicting theories. Which one has the higher probability of success? That's kind of how you keep getting closer. And that's why just like the open source conversation, I think, is so critical, because that's like the essence of science, in my opinion.
Nice. That's a very interesting point that you mentioned here, the open source nature of all of this, that like allowing the community to operate out in the open. That connects to something that we heard yesterday. One of the VCs, I think it was Adam Draper, was saying that once you're like just trying to be the best, like really understand the truth, then it's not about secrets anymore. It's just about being the best. So it seems like in this model, if you can put all your science out, you are just like attracting the best talent, and you're just focusing on the innovation itself. And you don't need to be secret about it.
I also think the token will allow for cool innovations here to kind of circumvent like the traditional IP process, because absolutely, like, these things need to be sustainable, and a big part of sustainability is like the DAOs accruing value to the IP that they create. And so what I think, though, a cool way to kind of circumvent the traditional IP process is by token gating data that you generate on certain tiers, so like maybe there's something that's not really critical to your IP. You need like one token. Maybe there's something that's the fundamental piece, like the fundamental piece of information that secures your IP. Like you need to hold a lot of tokens to the point where you're like one of the top members in the DAO. But it allows for a gradient almost of information that you're sharing, and gradients of trust versus sort of such a binary scale of like you can't know any of this or you can know all of this information.
Nice. So there's even some creativity coming in this domain. I'm happy to hear this, but I feel like we also need to kind of talk about if I was a scientist who until now had no idea about like IP NFTs or DAOs, like how do I get my research funded by a BioDAO? Is this a similar process for all of you, or is this different? Can somebody take us through this process of how do I get my research funded?
I can go again first. So for AthenaDAO, we do it differently than I think all the BioDAOs, specifically VitaDAO. I know the process really well because I was a contributor. We do it by cohort, and that means that we do a call for submissions. So we already did ovarian aging, and we just finished PCOS and endometriosis. Each cohort comes accompanied by a health report. This last two ones were reproductive health reports, because obviously ovarian aging deals with reproduction, so does PCOS and endometriosis. But they're accompanied by a health report in which we go over some of the highlights of where science, startups, and clinicians are today in that area of research. And the reason we do it this way is because it allows us to work with specific experts at specific times. And that way we do it very focused. Andrew mentioned BioDAOs being sustainable. The best way to be sustainable is to get to something very fast, other than any other platforms that any other the BioDAOs are developing on their own. Obviously, you want to have assets under management that are valuable, and you need to get to translation as fast as possible. So you have to be have a very good method of looking at science to try to get to something that obviously ends up being a licensable product, a company, or basically something that can bring things back to the treasury other than whatever else you're developing in tandem. So that's how we do it. We do call for submissions. That doesn't mean that we do not accept. If you put a submission for a project, we meet amazing researchers all the time. And even if it's not PCOS or we say send it. But obviously, I do think that the very focus looking at different areas of research, even though we believe in systems biology, and that's something we're trying to figure out, how can we connect scientists to each other because they don't talk in different areas of research as much. When it comes to vetting the science and looking what could potentially be an IP NFT, we found that doing this very targeted approach for now works. I guess we'll tell you in 12 months if we had the results we wanted, because we would have gone through 3 or 4 cycles already of different areas of research.
Nice.
And that's for AthenaDAO and women's health research.
This raises another interesting question that I would like to get into afterwards, is like, how do you do the internal selection process? But before we do that, maybe some of the other guys can take us through their process. Maybe Andrew, you welcome actually. Andrew Bakst, I'll call you, because you didn't get to introduce yourself and so on, but maybe you could speak about how a scientist can get funding from HairDAO if they are researching in that area.
Yeah, so we talked to, or so our community encompasses both, I would say, like the best traditional hair loss researchers, and then also like a really strong group of internet native hair loss researchers. And like, frankly, like the best may actually be in the internet native group. So we field ideas like both through email and then also like Andrew was saying before on our Discord server. But regardless of where the inflow comes in from, like it's very much a competition, like which ideas in the Discord get the most popularity, like constant peer review. Obviously, the bigger your community is, the more people that are looking at all the ideas, providing feedback. And what's really cool is like as the ideas get traction, people from the community keep pushing it forward. So like we have one piece of research which is about to enter like more so like the observational study stage, so actual human in vivo testing. And we had researchers step in to help us do the business development work necessary to get that to hopefully where we can cross the finish line. And then also like with the early stage ideas, people are constantly debating gene targets, like which tests we should do to validate which targets, et cetera. So yeah, it ultimately becomes very competitive in our Discord wherever the ideas come from.
Okay, nice. So this makes it sound like the community of hair loss interested people is already gathered on your Discord, and you have to basically compete in the intellectual debate with the other scientists, and it's a sort of a bottom-up way so that the best research sort of emerges out of that collective conversation.
Yeah, exactly. That's beautifully put.
Nice. So Albert, do you also want to describe your process? You were looking kind of appreciated.
Yeah, so quite similar to Laura's and like AthenaDAO's process. We don't have focused funding calls, but we're actually going to start with that. We've for the last 2-3 months looked at various domains of SynBio because it's a very horizontal field. There's like over 30-40 different applications, over 300 different research labs in the world working on their own things. So what we've done is like we've looked at the most promising areas that actually works today. Unfortunately, a lot of SynBio research like is not going to mature until like 5 to 10 years until we see it, working at a scale that is cost efficient and that can result in actual products on the market that any day person can buy. So we built deep knowledge expertise by actually, and I can also recommend this to anyone who wants to build a thesis in SynBio, is look at the national grant databases in Europe, in the US, and see who received the grants in the last 5 years. So what we've done is like we looked at the labs who received grants around 2-3 years ago and where the grant money is coming to its end. If you focus on those research labs, you can guarantee that they've had funding for this focused area and they're running out of funding. So you're coming in at a very good opportunity to provide your opportunity to them. And they usually have quite mature technologies already due to the previous funding that they had. So it works very well of coming in at the when the research is about to be translated. Usually when we reach out to them, they have some IP that needs a little bit more of funding to kind of like complete it and make it sort of like market ready to be spun out or licensed to a larger corporation. So yeah, that's how we narrow down. That's how we stay focused. And really, when somebody applies or we find someone that we'd like to fund, we take them through a due diligence process where we bring in different subject matter experts from the community, or if it's a very niched subject area, we go out and find the right person. And we make sure that they're properly incentivized and that they know their field, have them review the project, and then finally we bring it to a community vote with the assessment from these different subject matter experts, so that the community can make the most educated decision, the most informed decision possible.
Nice. So there are some individual differences here in the fields. I see also the scope of like hair loss and synthetic biology go far apart. Chris, do you also want to take us through the process of PsyDAO, and then maybe we go into some of your success stories and how this has already worked out?
Yeah. With PsyDAO, we actually haven't funded any deals yet, and have been. It's had a couple of false starts or something. The community's gotten active, and then we, for whatever reason, just shifting people, haven't ended up launching a token. And now it seems like the plan we're building, we're currently collaborating with Robin Carhart-Harris, who's one of the world's leading psychedelic researchers based at UCSF, who is at Imperial College. And we are working with him and Unlimited Sciences, which I think they did the large data survey collection for Johns Hopkins. That was the largest done for a psychedelic survey, and they just published some really interesting results on that. But they're planning to team up. They want to help support Robin's new lab, and that as part of that new lab, we want to have this kind of open science survey engine that Balazs Szigeti, this great postdoc, came up with. And he sort of has become well known for his paper on self-blinded microdosing. So really kind of this cool thought leader on citizen science and open science in the psychedelic space. And he works around Robin's lab as well. So we have this kind of collaboration going. And I think it will likely be the project that is launched at the same time as a token, or, you know, to help fund part of it. But what's interesting about this whole process really is that PsyDAO in some ways has moved for the time being into being something that's product focused in its launch, which is to say, we really want to be building out this token protocol for making an open science survey engine inside the psychedelics market. And we think for a host of reasons, the psychedelics market is unique in really needing citizen science to really improve research and IP validation more generally, because it's been criminalized for so long. So it is, for a host of other reasons as well, it's a perfect market to get these new tools, you know, these tokenized IP tools sort of into action, and to figure out, all right, how can we co-organize here in a way where also in the psychedelic space, the ethics of intellectual property are just at the forefront of many concerns around commercialization and the mainstreaming of the market, and in particular, an erosion and a kind of an attack on indigenous peoples and sort of plant medicine and what's called traditional knowledge in the IP economy that doesn't get protected by anything, and is oftentimes sort of what people come to as public culture, but it just means it can be a pretty intense exchange for people. And what's cool about PsyDAO and tokenized IP as well is that we're building a network of people who have been active in the space, of indigenous advisors and things where, as we try and, you know, do a system upgrade for the IP system in the psychedelics market, we can use a DAO and this tokenized IP platform and some just innovation in tokenized IP that I love kind of across the board, just agree across the board with what everyone was sharing about how there's a new design space. So I actually think PsyDAO is likely to maybe take that approach for a little bit. It kind of makes sense to deploy a designed, intervention in the justice system for the IP, for the psychedelic IP economy. And that I think should be hopefully supportive of the whole ecosystem, because the more we can be innovating with these tools, it goes back to the open source point. All of the legal tools, of course, they have to be open source fully without conditions, because it's just contracts that people can see, right? It's just, that's of course fine. And what's interesting, I think, about what we're doing in BioDAOs and with Web3 and with this, again, new layer of tokenized IP, is we're also moving past some unhelpful assumptions that occur when open source just means complete relinquishment of IP altogether. Throw something into the public domain where you go, great, but all you're doing is reifying existing market power. They're just going to come in and take this, and it doesn't do anything really to structurally change the economic patterns that I think we all want to sort of solve for. And so I think kind of offering technologies that just enable new means of interaction with IP there just end up being a big help.
This has been very interesting to see how indeed this is a design space, because all these different areas of research have slightly different approaches here on how do you fund it, what you guys are doing. But one thing that I hear is like seems to be really important is this like commonality of the mission that we see, for example, in HairDAO. It seems to work out really well, that this narrow and clear idea of what they're trying to target allows a group of interested people who are solving that problem to come together and actually fund and basically rally behind that goal and try to achieve it. Can we maybe hear some of like the success stories? I think yesterday it was mentioned that HairDAO is already in the process of like producing a medicine. Maybe that would be an interesting story to tell. How did you pull that off?
Totally. And Bakst, feel free to chip in as well on this one. But yeah, it was the very first research study we funded. We did it with Professor Ralph Paus out of University of Miami. I'm actually going down there to work with him next week, which is super exciting. But yeah, we ran an in vitro test on a T3 T4 thyroid hormone combination formulation. We prolonged the antigen growth phase of the follicles on a human scalp skin biopsy. Now T3 or thyroid hormones are widely prescribed for people with orally at much higher dosages for people with underactive thyroid hormones. So there's a ton of available safety data on it. Now what we're really trying to figure out is the efficacy data. Like, will this regrow hair in vivo, which is ultimately like the most important thing. We always joke, like we have the meme of like the bell curve of intelligence, and it's just like human in vivo on either side of it. Like that's ultimately all that matters, regardless of all these sort of like disease models that people use in hair loss, like mice, for example, which just really aren't very relevant for the human hair follicle. Yeah, because we've gotten great in vitro data, we've lined up our compounding pharmacy, we've lined up doctors who are willing to prescribe it off label, and we're running, starting within probably, within a month from now, we're running an observational study in vivo. Bakst and I are both taking it ourselves. We are participants in this trial. We're obviously confident in it, and if we're going to talk the talk, we should probably walk the walk. So we're doing that. Yeah, we're in the process of signing people up for the trial. So if anybody's interested, please hop in the Discord, and you're in Miami, we'd love to include you in the trial. There'll be some sort of like IP fractionalized ownership if you participate in the trial. But it's going to be a super official trial from a data collection standpoint. It won't be like a clinical trial that's recognized by the FDA, but we think it'll have all of the, we think we'll collect all of the data to hopefully make patients feel comfortable that it's safe and effective. And yeah, we're going to find out in the coming months, like if we can really regrow hair in people. And if we can, that's a brand new product that's available for all hair loss patients, like literally within the month. So super exciting.
That is exciting indeed. Yeah, it's cool to see that you guys are taking medicine, like starting the journey of founding the DAO, and actually now having a product that you're so confident that you're going to participate in the trial.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have one more success story. If anybody wants to really share, please step up. And then otherwise I would ask some critical questions and a little bit about the drawbacks of like the challenges that are also part of it.
I'd like to say that it's a success that we've raised over $500,000 for women's health from the crypto ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Because that's a big deal, that it all came from Web3 funders. That means that we got a bunch of men that didn't care usually for women's health to care. And $500,000 is not just little change. So we're very excited, because if we can do this during the bear times, imagine what we can do during the bull run. And our auction really showed the interest by the general public, because 83 of our bids were people under $1,000. It wasn't the regular Web3 funders or big checks. It was just our community and women that just thought, okay, I need to put some capital into this. So we're very excited about that, because it means that if we take the time to educate, we've done a lot of education in bringing female researchers into DeSci, people that didn't know what a wallet was, what the crypto is. And we did a lot of that for women as well. So we think that, we're very excited, because we do see the potential of being able to onboard the next wave of Web3 users that are going to be women that actually do have capital, but they just need to get educated and be driven by a mission that really matters to them. So to us, that's like a big win, because they're not usually crypto natives. This is their first wallet. this is their first token auction, and that's massive. That they're willing to put more than $50 on this, and they did it with us. So we're very excited about that.
Or that's really incredible that you pulled in so many non-crypto traditional people into the ecosystem. What did you do? Like, what was your strategy to do that?
We took the time to educate people. You know, we created the DeSci 101. We did the sessions. I say always go to where people are, not where you are at. And it still needs another layer. But I don't know if you guys noticed, we've done a lot. AthenaDAO has done a lot in pushing decentralized science, even as a community effort. We did the breakfast around the world. We did the DeSci 101, the office hours. Like, if it meant that one of us was helping somebody online with their wallet, that's what we did. I mean, if we can do that with the means that we had then, I know that with the means that we have in 6 months or even already now, we can do so much more if there's like a bull run, right? So we're so much better prepared because we already know what works and what doesn't, and where we need to put more of that. But it's basically educating people. And I said it many times, the NFTs, collecting digital PHPs might not be like a woman's thing. The DeFi thing might not be a woman's thing, but if you touch them with something that matters to them, and women's health matters to all of them, and they know that it's about mission, that is the big opportunity, right? That's why we work so hard. And it goes back to your original question, Jonathan, taking it away from the hard biotech science that we deal with and making it very digestible and easy to understand to women, the end use for them. And the end use for us is when it's crystal clear that those $50 that you could use on supplements that do nothing for you could be better put to fund a research by a scientist that doesn't usually get this funding, and it could potentially actually generate better fertility treatments, delaying ovarian aging, better diagnostics for PCOS and endometriosis, autoimmune diseases. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So it's a massive opportunity. There's so much to tackle. Obviously, it's going to take more than us just doing it. And it's going to take a lot of growth and obviously a whole lot more capital, but it's about getting the people that are not traditionally involved. That is the next biggest opportunity in the ecosystem. We believe that fully.
Yeah, I see that point clearly. Like, the education is really important part of like also what I've been trying to do today in this panel, like to explain to people what is actually going on. And not only women need to be informed, but even traditional scientists need to be informed what is happening in this domain, which in itself is a scientific enterprise to like create the consensus algorithms that drive the new forms of creating research, funding research, and ultimately contributing to the knowledge. And for what it's worth, you definitely conveyed the idea to me of how valuable an AthenaDAO token might be, because owning a stake in the intellectual property that is behind women's health, it certainly makes a lot of sense. If it's 50% of the population and it has been neglected, maybe they'll find something really quick, because it seems like a very low-hanging fruit. So
well, just one thing quickly, one AthenaDAO token might lead to one more baby on Earth. And since we're going to the population, it's quite a big mission. You know, with some AthenaDAO tokens, you could be funding research that improves fertility rates. Isn't everybody worried about that? And it doesn't just impact women, it impacts society in general.
Certainly a great mission. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. But there's also seems to be like a unique set of challenges in a DAO. Because coordination seems to be so much more let's say chaotic. Can you maybe address some of this? Like, some argue that it's making research more transparent, and others say it's not actually more transparent and it's not more clear. So where do you stand on this debate, and what are maybe the challenges that you have experienced? How did you address them on the way so far?
Are you talking about governance or the science?
Let's say governance, or in general. Like, I don't know exactly what challenges you might have experienced as like leaders of a BioDAO. Maybe what was the most challenging thing that you had to overcome as like the founder of HairDAO, and how did you overcome?
For us,
what are you struggling with still?
Yeah, well, for us, I think the biggest hurdle is learning the biology. because like we had no real bio background before starting HairDAO. So that was, I think, the biggest hurdle. But what's cool is I think we're kind of at the point where we are better at that. And that's a really cool part about being involved with one of these DAOs too, is that you upskill yourself like as you go. So yeah, I would say that was our biggest hurdle.
Nice. This ties so nicely into what we have been talking about, like the education part that Laura was just mentioning, and how non-scientists become scientists over the course of getting involved in the DAO. That's also what Albert was saying earlier. So that seems to be one of the biggest challenges, like just like we have just mentioned, to actually translate the science and teach people and teach them how to learn these concrete, like seemingly difficult, but in the end, often quite concrete points.
100%. Education is like a huge part. We're actually launching a kind of video game type products called Ready Player One that hopefully does what you're talking about in terms of helping more people up level.
Nice.
My personal goal is to get to the point where like Ready Player One level 10 is like more impressive than like getting your PhD at some traditional university for hair loss at least. And there's no reason that can't be applied to every indication.
I see. It also decentralizes education, so in a way, like the best teachers for hair loss are not necessarily in universities, but probably on your Discord.
Yep.
Yeah, nice. Then maybe, Chris, you could talk to some challenges that you had encountered maybe in PsyDAO, where you said that there were some challenges like a shift in leadership or things like this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wasn't involved in PsyDAO until this sort of round, so I don't probably can't comment too well on the legacy bumps there. But more generally, I mean, I think that because we're building new culture and there's a lot of different types of interests, and these are powerful assets that we're playing with real money. That's hard, you know. It's hard. We kind of lack the imagination because we lack the practice of being able to organize ourselves around intellectual property in a liquid market, you know, without that being inside a corporate silo or something like this. We've never sort of organized ourselves as IP producers, which is really kind of what everyone is, given the ubiquity of the IP economy and that copyright applies. The questions in the copyright space as to who can or can't be an IP producer are at the level of species. There's actually case law saying monkeys, this monkey took a selfie. Yeah, monkey gets some rights. Monkey gets some money, and essentially I think it was a settlement for the photo he took of himself that ensured he was going to be well fed, you know, something like this. But that's the level where we're at of what is necessary to be an IP producer. And I think when we want to expand, make that as inclusive as possible and keep thinking about new ways to have people come in, gamifying things like what HairDAO is doing, to me, just makes a ton of sense and is a really powerful way, I think, of organizing people into productive pursuits by essentially transforming how and where conflict arises. And I think that more generally in PsyDAO is when we launch what would be sort of this psychedelic commons, it would be something that has been sort of well designed, you know, to think about an IP justice system that invokes and incorporates a ton of work that's already been done by people in the space outside of Web3, right? The psychedelic space is just full of people who've been thinking really carefully about all of this for a long time. And so thinking about, well, how also can we just plug in a tokenized DAO form of this to support, you know, essentially to just make it easier for those parts to communicate with IP and support one another, and have an alternative toolkit and means for experimentation.
All right, there's one audience question which I would like to ask. and we are at the end of this panel. Maybe we can take this 2 minutes to go over this, but to tie everything together that we have been talking, it seems like, from what I understand, the IP NFT enables the scientists to rally funding behind their research, and then also own the intellectual property, and thereby kind of become. So yesterday somebody said they are the hero. They should be the hero of the scientific journey. They can be the hero by engaging in this, and then their challenge becomes to translate that research to the people who might want to fund it. As we have seen today, that seems to be one of the biggest problems here. And then there's another question in the audience, which also relates to one of the challenges, which is, could you elucidate your forthcoming procedural measures regarding the management of global regulatory frameworks pertinent to your DAOs? So the regulatory problems that are there in the space, could maybe somebody address them?
I want to take this because I have a different take. I still want my PhD, like one of the contributors, to be the one that takes care of the science on my ovaries. It's not going to be me who is going to figure out if my ovaries are going to live longer by biohacking myself personally. That's for me. I think that we still need to work with established academic institutes. I think the most amazing thing we could do is bridge their reputation and establishments with what we're doing here, which is the hyper-financialization of science, which some areas of science do need. And one of the biggest things for us, for instance, for AthenaDAO, is to work 1000% within all regulatory frameworks. For instance, our deal flow is under NDA. Why? Because if I want to work with biotech, if I want to sell my IP, I'm going to have to show them that we went through all protocols of due diligence, and the only thing that they will touch, that we know who saw it. So I think that's a different, and that's why I think all the DAOs are different, because we all have different frameworks that we want to work with. And for instance, for us, our key is women's health, as I said, is overlooked. It doesn't mean that there's a ton of IP out there probably that is sitting in just, Chris talks about IP a lot, but I think of all the innovation that's probably sitting in a lab that hasn't seen the light of day simply because of funding, not because of anything else other than that. So for us, our thing is establishing those networks that really make the connect between Web3 and academia, and not necessarily say, oh, we're going to change everything. Because in the end, I make this example. Everybody hates the New York Times. But if you get written up in the New York Times, you will tell everybody that you were in the New York Times. It's the same with Nature. No, oh, Nature, like publishing is expensive. But if you get in Nature, you'd speak about that you were published in Nature. So it's too hard to change that reputation too fast. And we're going to have to figure out a way to bridge from past legacy reputation to our own reputations that we're building, and how they are going to interact with each other, where one day in the future, potentially what we're building will be at the same level of reputation and playing field. But that's a process, and that process is going to require that we do work within regulatory frameworks, or change them in a way that do make sense within those frameworks already. And I say this again, this is very particular to women's health, and this is how we're doing things, but I don't think it applies to all the BioDAOs. And that's what's amazing about BioDAOs, is that they're all their own experiment and their own thing.
So in 1 minute, we have the next speaker coming on. So if anyone has one last word, I'll allow it, but then we have to hang on. No, great. Thank you, Laura, for finishing this off with the point of with this inclusive point. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming on, chatting about your successes and about your challenges, about what IP NFTs are, and enlightening our audience as to what this is and where it's going. So
thank you for having us. Nice seeing everybody again.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yes.
Look forward to seeing everyone soon, I hope.
Yeah. See you.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.